Let me share with you the terrible wonders I have come to know.
And welcome back to more Darkest Dungeon. This is episode 33, week 80, getting underway. Alright, so we're starting off with the Caretakers Convention town event. We've seen this one before. It's one I try to go for as much as possible. It allows us to remove negative quirks, even if they're locked in, as well as lock in positive quirks, all for free. So it's a huge gold savings. And before we get to anything else, you're going to see something you haven't seen in a while, some stagecoach action.
Another soul battered and broken, cast aside like a spent torch. To those with a keen eye, gold gleams like a dagger's point.
Alright, so I don't exactly remember my thought process there, but you saw what happened. There was a level 3 grave robber on offer, looked pretty good. I didn't have any room in the roster, so I decided to get rid of one of my lower level highwaymen to make room for her. Okay, and on to the task at hand. We're going back into the Courtyard. The quest is called Served Cold, and we have to kill one Viscount. Alright, so a couple of things. First, as you saw last episode, we're done with all the ancillary side quests and journal entries and all that, and we're starting just the final push for all the dungeons and all the areas. And we started last time with the Color of Madness DLC in the farmstead and wrap that up, although, you know, as you saw, it's one of those DLCs that you can keep playing, and you can go back and continue to do Endless Harvest if you choose. But from a storyline point of view, we kind of wrapped it up. You have the whole backstory, etc. And so now we're moving on to the Crimson Court DLC. Again, we're going to save the original 4 dungeon areas, the Ruins Cove, Warrens, and Weald, for after the DLCs, and then, of course, wrap it all up with the final dungeon, which is called the Darkest Dungeon. So I chose to do it in this order for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, when you move through the original 4 dungeons and into the Darkest Dungeon, just the way it was in the original boxed campaign, there's a certain narrative flow and continuity that's A, really good, and B, you don't really want to interrupt by interjecting, DLC zones and their content, along the way or in between. And then second, this is a little bit more subtle. On the one hand, you don't want to end the whole story with the Darkest Dungeon and then have more content after that, even though that is the way that most players experienced it, because DLC comes out, much later. Rather, as is often the case with any video game, once DLC has come out and then you go back and play a fresh game, you often want to do the DLC in an earlier order. And that's the case here. The DLCs provide a certain amount of backstory. I mean, that's the case for every dungeon. It's all backstory. We're learning the ancestors' memoirs, right? But in a sense, these are kind of prequels in a way. Not true prequels, but they just give more depth and understanding about what happened even before our ancestor had delved into the dark arts and led the estate into such disarray. So one moment before we continue on, you'll notice we're in the districts interface here, and you're going to see me build the House of the Yellow Hand. It gives buffs to your rogue classes, the Bounty Hunter, Grave Robber, and Highwayman, plus 4% chance to crit, and plus 5% scouting chance. And of course I realized that in an earlier episode, which was presented out of order, You already saw that we had the House of the Yellow Hand and some other ones, and we purchased something else. Like I mentioned in that episode, I just did it out of order to get the side quest out of the way so we could move through the backstories of the main dungeons and DLC uninterrupted. But here you have it. This is the week in which it actually occurred and we were able to build that particular upgrade. Alright, so getting back to the task at hand, served cold, kill the Viscount. This is our third journey into the Courtyard. However, it is not the final quest in the Crimson Court DLC line. Unlike the other dungeons and areas which have 3 versions or quests associated with them, the Crimson Court DLC has 4, and the last 2 are both just considered champion level dungeons, which is why we're doing them now. So because this isn't the final quest in the Crimson Court line, for this episode I'm not going to present to you the full montage of all the ancestors' memoirs prior to entering the dungeon. I'll save that for next episode, which will be the final episode in the Crimson Court DLC. And just like I did with the Color of Madness last episode, and like I'm going to do with all the dungeons upcoming, I'll give you all the ancestors' memoirs in entirety, in chronological order, before we start that quest. Alright, so we're just about ready to go. We got a Flagellant, Highwayman, Jester, and Vestal. This dungeon and the next dungeon, just like you saw when we did the Baron, they're considered epic dungeons. They're intended to be played in multiple attempts where you enter, do some, leave, come back, etc. But you know how it is. Being B-Burner on Devitron Gaming Channel, we're doing it all in one go. Welcome back to the Courtyard, Devitron.
The feasting and revelry would last for weeks at a time. Great stone tables were set with such an abundance of rare delicacies that we would stuff ourselves until the exotic became mundane. When the lavish spread began to spoil, a ravenous gourmand gleefully proposed that we sample from the fetid pile of composting refuse. The notion was dismissed as decidedly unhealthy. But days later, he was found cackling madly atop a heap of rancid comestibles, licking his fingers in delight. The corpulent braggart could never eat his fill. Let him dine on sharpened steel tonight.
Okay, so here we go. You'll notice 2 of our heroes already have the Crimson Curse. There, our Highwayman was craving, so I gave him a little blood. As for the maps, you remember these. They're not revealed to you. You have to go through hallway by hallway, room by room. The maps are huge. You have to find colored keys to unlock colored gates, etc. Buckle up, Devitron. This is going to be a long ride.
Masterfully executed. A decisive pummeling. blossoms. Foolish horrors, brought low and driven into the mud.
All right, so first fight down, Devatron. We are underway.
Their formation is broken. Maintain the offensive. Press this advantage. Give them no quarter. Slowly, gently. This is how a life is taken.
Okay, so already some pretty rough RNG. That fight shouldn't have been that hard. There was a nasty reshuffle early on that affected our ability to end the fight quickly. And then along the way, our flagellant got infected with the Crimson Curse, which is to be expected. You know, when you do these long epic dungeons in one fell swoop, you're probably going to have all 4 heroes with the Crimson Curse by the end of it, right? But nonetheless, we got through it, and we're moving on here. So as for this party composition, you might think it's a little unorthodox taking the flagellant instead of, say, a shield breaker or man-at-arms with guard, etc. But because he has really good bleed attacks that can hit any rank, he's very valuable in here. Bleed works very well in these Crimson Court dungeons. And also with his heal over time, he can help as a backup healer.
Obliterated. Continue the onslaught. Destroy them all. annihilated. Seize this momentum. Push on to the task's end.
Okay, so as for our path through this dungeon, just like you saw with the Baron, ahead of time I mapped out the most direct route to get to the boss. Occasionally there'll be excursions to gather some firewood from the wine crates, if you remember that. It's the only way you're able to camp in here. Or there also may be a trip to get a colored key to open a gate, etc. But for the most part, it's the most direct path to the boss.
Confidence surges as the enemy crumbles. A singular strike. Death by inches. Be wary. Triumphant pride precipitates a dizzying fall.
Alright, so a great fight there. And you'll notice another reason the Flagellant works so well in this composition is that he can shift between rank 1 or 2 as the Highwayman, you know, bounces around and leapfrogs with his riposte and then slides back with his point-blank shot. It doesn't matter to the Flagellant. In rank 1 or 2, he can use both of his bleed attacks as well as cast his heal over time spell on any of the other party members. So another reason that he synergizes with this composition quite nicely.
a slow death. Unforeseen. Unforgiving. A powerful blow. Great is the weapon that cuts on its own.
As victories mount, so too will resistance.
Man, how good is the Jester, Devatron? Right? I mean, he can do an area effect, damage over time bleed on enemy ranks 2 and 3. He can do a single target damage over time bleed attack on ranks 2 or 3. He can stress heal, at least on individual targets, better than any other stress healer in the game. And he can buff the whole party for longer marathon-style fights with Battle Ballad, which is just the best buff in the game. He has incredible dodge, so he's pretty survivable. I mean, he's just a beaut, you know? He's just an absolute beaut.
Well struck. Eradicated. Compassion is a rarity in the fevered pitch of battle. The blood quickens.
A trifling victory, but a victory nonetheless.
All right, so excellent fight there. And here you're going to see something that you see pretty much every fight, having to just leave incredibly valuable treasure and gold and everything, you know, on the ground because there's no space. Now here I actually make a mistake. We don't actually need this key because we're going around the gate that it unlocks. The path I've taken is kind of an alternate path. So I just tried to X out of it and leave it in the chest, but then the game is like, oh, you can't leave quest items. So it forced me to destroy something, make room for it, and take it, even though we're ultimately not actually going to use that key. So a little bit of an oversight on my part, but not the end of the world.
decimated. The ground quakes. Remind yourself that overconfidence is a slow and insidious killer.
Okay, so we're moving along here. I realize this is just a marathon of a dungeon. Just the dungeon section of this episode is like an hour and 40 minutes. I mean, it's just insane. And I apologize for that, but at the same time, like I said when we did this in the Baron, it's just like watching a movie, you know, an hour and a half, 2-hour movie. Just sit back, buckle up, get some popcorn or something, Dev, and enjoy the show. But yeah, as for our progress, the group is doing really well. I was much more comfortable at this point than I was, say, when we did the Baron. That dungeon hit us pretty hard pretty early, and I was worried. But so far in this one, we're doing great.
Devastating blow.
innovation and improvement. Success so clearly in view. Or is it merely a trick of the light?
Okay, a little bit of a struggle there, mostly because that nasty Chevalier would not get out of rank 4. Corpses kept blocking him from sliding closer, allowing the highwayman to hit him, but no problem in the end. We got through it. And then notice there, we didn't have any more room to take that torch, so I just went ahead and lit it. And I don't know if you remember this about torches in here. They don't actually provide light. The light is just considered blood light. But what torches do is they buff your party with a bonus to accuracy for the next battle that they fight. So instead of leaving it, might as well use it, right? Just click it, get the buff, and for the next fight, we'll have a little bit of bonus to accuracy.
Precision and power. Waits for the slightest lapse in concentration. The will to fight falters. Injury, palpable fear.
This This expedition at least promises success. Mortality clarified in a single strike. Impressive. These nightmarish creatures can be felled. They can be beaten.
Okay, so a couple of fights there. Pretty good stuff. The second was a little tougher than the first. But really nice stuff from the group. We were doing great. Now you'll notice, what have I done here? I've actually backtracked back toward the entrance, and I've unlocked that gate that we got the key for that I didn't need to do. Like, why did we do that, right? The reason is, when I picked that key up by accident, and like I said, the game forced me to pick it up, it took up that inventory slot. And as you know, inventory is at such a premium in here that carrying around a key like that we don't need for the entire, hour and a half dungeon is just a no-no. So I did have to backtrack and do an extra fight to get rid of it, but in the end, I think it was well worth it.
handsome reward for a task well performed.
Okay, here using some medicinal herbs on the Forgotten Delicacies curio. If you recall, this gives you some food, which is just immeasurably helpful, especially when you're doing these dungeons without stopping.
Reeling, about to break.
Packs laden with loot are often low on supplies.
Okay, so kind of a tough crit on our poor highwayman at the end there. But in a sense, he deserved it. He was critting those bloodsuckers a lot on his own and getting a lot of riposte attacks in, so they kind of owed him one. And then as for the treasure chest, went ahead and used a key on it, hoping to get better loot, and kind of got crap. I mean, some nice heirlooms, but no good treasure otherwise. And then here, using some more medicinal herbs on the Forgotten Delicacies to get some more food, which, like I just said last time we did it, is super valuable. And then, of course, we have some more Crimson Curse drama, people craving and whatnot. If you'll notice, everybody is cursed at this point. And then last, finally, a wine crate. So we're able to get some much-needed campfire wood, so we can finally get some rest in and get some hot buffs going, Devatron. Alright, so let's backtrack, use this firewood, and get our first rest in.
A moment of respite. A chance to steel oneself against the coming horrors.
Okay, so as for our camping buffs, we're going to prevent a nighttime ambush with our highwayman. You do have to do that in here, or else just risk getting ambushed. So it's unfortunate because it's kind of a waste of a camping buff, but you got to do it. And then I used his Unparalleled Finesse, which buffs his speed, dodge, and then accuracy and damage with melee. And then I also buffed him with the Jester's Tiger's Eye, which increases accuracy and critical chance. So the Highwayman is like our star, you know, he's like our secret weapon. He gets all the buffs, and he's going to be doing all the damage, at least all the direct damage.
blood pumps, the limbs obey. Impressive haul, if you value such things.
All right, so some great stuff there, and you can immediately see just how good the Highwayman is with those buffs. I mean, he's always good, right? But just one-shotting things, big numbers. So it's always refreshing right after you camp to just really unload on the enemy. And then the other thing, I mean, this has been going on the whole time. How good is bleed, right? It just works wonders in here. And these enemies are weak to it, so they're always getting hit with it, and it just chips away at them so well.
If only treasure could staunch the flow of otherworldly corruption.
So you'll notice me getting more food here. What happened, and I realized this after we rested, is I had miscalculated how much food to bring. On the one hand, I brought lots of shovels to get firewood with and camp and rest a lot, but on the other, I hadn't taken into consideration that each time you camp, you need food, and you need a lot of it, especially if you want to go for the max health and stress heal. So that's why I'm having to scavenge and trying to get as much food as possible along the way. So the real problem with not having enough food is that I wasn't going to be able to camp and rest as much as I want. That said, I knew I could get to at least the boss without, needing to camp that much. So on the one hand, it wasn't that big of a deal. But then on the other hand, you have things like hunger checks.
Mind that such missteps are the exception and not the rule.
So because of this pretty serious miscalculation, right, and the resulting, severe shortage of food, I was starting to stress a lot. Think about it. At this point, we have 8 food in our inventory, and we only have 3 medicinal herbs left with which to purify the forgotten delicacies and try to scavenge some more food. Now, if we camped right now and chose the max, health and stress heal food option, that would be all our food. That takes 8 food. Not to mention, we have just under an hour left of this dungeon still to get through. Not to mention, we still might get more hunger checks, right? So this was really serious, and at this point, I was totally stressed and had no idea how I was going to resolve this.
A spark without kindling is a goal without hope.
Now, you can't fault somebody for thinking at this point, given all these constraints and this kind of emergency, that we should conserve our firewood and our food and save them, till before the boss, right? But no, that's not what I did. I immediately camped. I used all our food, took the max heal and stress heal option. And to be honest, Devatron, I have no idea why I did that. As for Camping Bus, we did exactly the same thing. Maybe I was just sticking to the walkthrough, and I knew I could get more food from forgotten delicacies that we had passed along the way. I don't know. But either way, at this point, we are completely out of food.
Teetering on the brink, facing the abyss.
Finding the stuff is only the first test. Now it must be carried home.
Okay, so things just going from bad to worse here, Debatron. Our jester reaching death's door, and he was dotted, so that's just, a recipe for failure. Thankfully, though, our Vestal was able to take her turn prior to his, and she was able to heal him off of death's door. But of course, now he's debuffed for the remainder of the dungeon. And as for the good news, if you can call it that, we were able to acquire the yellow key, so that'll enable us to open the yellow gate, which is coming up. And then here, as I suggested, I knew I had passed several forgotten delicacies along the way, and I could purify them and get some food with our remaining medicinal herbs. That time, a nice lucky roll. We got a full 8. So maybe I wasn't so dumb after all.
Assault cannot be left unanswered. Confusion, nerves, and panic. Brilliant confluence of skill and purpose. The wounds of war can be healed, but never hidden.
Okay, so some pretty rough RNG there. Just a small random hallway encounter, a single insatiable ghoul, and a sycophant. Shouldn't have been that difficult, but throw in a crit or two, and all of a sudden your party can quickly be in trouble. And speaking of a party in trouble, bam, another hunger check. Just exacerbating this already dire food shortage situation. And I gotta say, in looking back at this and editing this episode and whatnot, it feels like I was getting an exorbitant amount of hunger checks. If I recall correctly, these Crimson Court dungeons are supposed to have fewer hunger checks than in, say, a regular dungeon. Now, I don't know if that's true or if I'm remembering it correctly or not, but either way, at least at this point, it was definitely feeling like I was getting way more hunger checks than usual. And speaking of food, we were able to purify one of those forgotten delicacies that we had passed on our way through here prior. Got 6 food, which isn't bad. Sometimes you only get 4. The one before that we got 8, so 6 is pretty good. Brings our total food count to 10 at this point. So we could do one more, 8 food rest at this point. But that would only leave us 2 to spare. If we get hunger check, we're going to need more than that, etc. We'll see what happens.
time to perform beyond one's limits. Cursed champion falls.
Alright, so much better RNG with that insatiable ghoul. Getting through that fight, no problem. So as for our progress, I know the map is kind of big and it doesn't always center on us. There it goes, but you'll see that we went kind of down to the lower left, retrieved the yellow key, and now we've backtracked back up the way we came, and then over to the right a little bit, and now we're pressing on. And here you'll notice gathering some more firewood from this wine crate, and you'll also notice I'm kind of stalling. One of the most stressful aspects of this food shortage crisis and this miscalculation was the fact that I was filming this live, okay? If this was just me playing the game and I wasn't recording it, I could have just taken my time, redrawn out my map, recalculated everything, and said, oh, okay, I won't rest here, but I will there, you know, that kind of thing. But in this situation, I was doing this live, and I had to figure out on the fly very quickly which planned rest areas I was going to skip and which ones I wasn't, and how much food could I maybe get from forgotten delicacies, etc., etc. So it added to my stress having to do this all on the fly while recording live. Now, one thing I should add in, you know, kind of in the interest of full disclosure, is that the situation isn't really that bad, okay? I've been a little bit over dramatic about the food shortage. The fact of the matter is, you can rest and use 0 food or 2 or 4. You don't have to use 8, right? 8 gets you a big heal and stress heal. But in reality, we could rest, say use 2 food, still get our camping buffs, and everything will be fine. So not as bad as I've made it out to be.
Prodigious size alone does not dissuade the sharpened blade.
All right, a nice big riposte crit there, Devitron. Just finishing that courtesan off in one blow. Really good stuff. Okay, the dreaded 4-manservant pool, Devatron. Those little guys are nasty. They have really high dodge, so they can be kind of slippery to hit. And they just do, a truckload of stress damage. They don't do a lot of direct damage. You're not going to just, wipe your party or anything, but they're pretty annoying, and they can shuffle you as well. So, yeah, getting 4 of them all at once is really no fun.
A fortune, waiting to be spent.
All right, so the last of our medicinal herbs got us 8 food, bringing us to a total of 18, so that's good news. Okay, and here, I don't know if we saw this when we did the Baron. When you uncover a secret room with a critical scouting check in these Crimson Court dungeons, there will be a prisoner inside. You just talk to them and you release them. And what happens is the very next week when you're back in the hamlet, they'll be available for you to recruit on the stagecoach.
Surgical precision.
Okay, so a nice double bleed fatality to end that fight. You may have noticed before that fight and then coming up here, I try to interact with the Forgotten Delicacies curio without any medicinal herbs, just touching it with the hand. First time it didn't do anything, but this time, boom, we got a negative quark. So just doing my best to try to get food if I can.
sedated.
Okay, so some lucky rolls our way that time. Prior to the fight, I had forgotten to reset the party order, so our highwayman was in rank 1 to begin. He couldn't use duelist advance and set up riposte, so instead he just one-shot the supplicant in rank 1 with his point-blank shot, which was lucky. And then also the entire party dodged one of the esquire's skewering repartees, and those can really hurt. They can crit your whole party, so to dodge them outright is super lucky. And then here, a little bad luck. Another hunger check. I mean, come on, Devitron. Enough with the hunger checks. All right, so a sound victory there, Devitron. And here we have a Forgotten Strongbox. Going to use a special key, get some good loot. And WTF, mate. I mean, just more heirlooms? Yeah, this run and using keys on special chests and all that, not very good. What can you do? We're not here for the loot. We're here for the story and the bosses, so we're pressing on.
Quickly the tide turns. marks the turning point.
And wow, a close call, Devitron. Man, that tentacle devour absolutely brutalizing our poor highwayman. It didn't reduce him to 0, thankfully, so he didn't get to death's door, no debuff. That would have been rough, so close to the end. We're coming up on the boss. Very lucky that he had like 1 hit point left.
The wounds of war can be healed, but never hidden.
All right, look here, a couple food dropped off of those enemies. That's pretty rare in here, so some more good luck our way. And that puts our total food to 16, so that's not bad. Assuming we don't get any more hunger checks, that's, 2 full 8 food rests between here and the boss. And truthfully, we're almost to the boss, okay? I don't think we would need to rest 2 more times. Now, of course, we don't have any firewood on us, but I'm probably stalling and checking my map here to see if there's any nearby. But yeah, it turns out, this went okay. It seemed a little bit crazy back right after we got the yellow key to camp right away, use all 8 food, leave us with 0. But I'm guessing that I just had a feel for these dungeons and, how much I could get out of those forgotten delicacies, and I went ahead and risked it. It was a little bit of a gamble, but Darkest Dungeon, it's a little bit about gambling. It's an RNG turn-based strategy game, so I took the gamble. It looks like it paid off, and we're going to be okay. Alright, so here's a wine crate. We can get some firewood. And I just noticed in our inventory that we did, in fact, have one firewood on us, so I stand corrected. I know I just said we didn't have any, but this puts us at 2 total, so we can, if we want, rest 2 more times. Okay, so 2 fights in a row there. Some nice stuff. Both sides getting their fair share of RNG, but ultimately the group is strong. I mean, the Highwayman just absolutely crushing it. And, of course, the Jester and Vestal supporting like champions. And I just love the Flagellant in here. His heal over time, backup healing, and his bleed attacks have all just been ace. And another hunger check. I mean, what's the deal, Devatron? Don't they know we're short on food?
Sedated.
All right, so the red key, Devatron, at last. This is the final key we're going to need in this dungeon. It unlocks the red gate, which leads directly to the boss. You can see his room just above us on the minimap there. And, yeah, so we're nearly there. I know it's been a long, grueling episode, and I appreciate you sticking it out with me. But, yeah, I kind of like these dungeons. Tell me what you think. They're very challenging. They really put the party to the test, but I think they're fun, and I hope they're fun to watch, so let me know. And just in case you're worrying, I'll lay your anxiety now. Unlike I did in the Baron dungeon, I'm not going to do the boss and then go chase after more loot afterwards. Once he's dead, we're done.
Gathered close in tenuous firelight and uneasy companionship.
Alright, so here we go with the camp, using the full 8 food to get the maximum health and stress heal. The buffs are exactly what we've been doing the whole way. Preventing nighttime ambush, and then using unparalleled finesse and Tiger's Eye on our Highwayman. Okay, so as for this boss encounter, it's a little tricky, and it can easily get out of hand and be very dangerous. What you're going to see is the Viscount himself, and then 3 slabs of meat kind of dangling from the ceiling. They occupy the other 3 enemy ranks. And what he'll do throughout the encounter is take a bite out of the various pieces of meat, and they buff him in different ways. So if it goes on too long and he gets really buffed up, he can do a lot of damage and wipe your party. So you can either try to kill the pieces of meat and then deal with him, or you can just try to bum rush the Viscount himself and take him out quickly before he gets too powerful. So I'll let you see which one I choose there. As for the Jester here, notice that I'm equipping Solo and Finale. You've never seen me use these, and they're going to be used to incredible effect in this fight. It's really pretty dramatic, and I think you're going to enjoy it.
The glutton's taste for morbidity is made more pronounced by his mutation.
Okay, I was starting to get worried because the Viscount kept healing himself, so I had to do something fast. Here comes the Solo from the Jester. Alright, and see how it puts him in rank 1, where he can use his Finale skill. And just like the Battle Ballads, it greatly increases the damage and critical chance of his Finale ability. So if he can use it and get it off, it's going to hit very hard. And there's the big Finale crit, 76 damage. The crowd goes wild. We need a big stun here so he doesn't heal. And the Vestal comes through.
Let us hope he enjoyed his last meal, served cold as it was.
Oh yeah, big time, Devatron. Big time crits and stuns. Whew, what a close call. Okay, so he dropped one of the Bounty Hunter set trinkets. Not a very good trinket, not a very good set, but hey, at least we finally got, you know, some Crimson Court trinket rewards. Whew, what a run, Devitron. What a run. All right, on to our rewards. A nice gold amount considering the quest reward, 25k. Otherwise, not much gold. A decent amount of heirlooms, especially considering we didn't have a lot of inventory to work with. This trophy is kind of garbage. Then we get an invitation from the Countess. That'll be for the next quest in here. And then one of the Hellion trinkets. Not very good. Not a very good set. What can you do? On to our quirks. Vitalis. Ruins Tactician replacing Unerring is really good for him. And then Roquet. Luminous. Maybe the best quirk in the game. Oh yeah. Big time, Devitron. The darkest dungeon. Crimson Court. The Viscount is down. What a run, Devitron. Let's see what things are like back in the hamlet.
The virulent clouds from the courtyard have abated. The airs of the estate feel narrowly agreeable once again.
Oh yeah, big time, Devitron. A veil lifted, crimson curse removed from all the heroes. Things are looking up, and we'll see you in the next episode.